The ever-thoughtful Tovah has asked that we begin as close to the announced time as possible in deference to the schedule of busy parents and babysitters. My name is Dorothy Denberg, and I have no role here tonight except to introduce Tovah, which is a great pleasure. I've worked at Barnard for 42 years in various roles, starting 42 years ago in the admissions office, then for many years in the dean's office, and then as dean of the college, and most recently as vice president for college relations. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here tonight because I'm the ultimate Barnard Toddler Center fan, supporter, and advocate. I'm also an alumna of the college, and it's fair to say there are a few people who love the college more, but I'm pretty confident that there's nobody who loves the Toddler Center more. I'm the mother of 3 daughters, and each of them sequentially broke my heart by choosing to go elsewhere for college. But all 3 of them are proud graduates of the Barnard Toddler Center, and that, and not their various Ivy League degrees, has served them very well in life. I'm also the grandmother of 3 grandchildren who are perfect in every way, of course, except that they live in Philadelphia and West Hartford and therefore can't attend the Toddler Center. So as a parent, I have to say I learned and grew because of my affiliation with the Toddler Center. When my first daughter was born in the mid-'70s, the Barnard College Toddler Center was one of only a very few programs in the city for 2-year-olds. As a first-time mother and the first among my friends to have children, I was, simply put, clueless. I knew about the Toddler Center only from watching mothers and strollers enter and leave Millbank 4 days a week. I might have failed completely to enroll my child in nursery school, but for the sage advice of then-director Pat Shin. The center offered my then only child a place for socialization, productive play, and helped us through our first separation process. Living in the bubble of a first-time mother with no friends with children, Michelle's first friends and play dates were other toddlers in the center. 35 years later, I can still remember her first play dates with Victoria and Avitai. My second daughter, coming second, had a circle of friends who were the younger siblings of her big sister. The Toddler Center was where she could be her own little person. When she faced a frightening surgery at 22 months, it was in a group formed by Pat and the Toddler Center that I found support, guidance, and comfort. Several years later, when I had my 3rd child, the Toddler Center was the place where I could once again marvel at the magic and mystery in the life of a toddler. Based on the number of cumulative hours I spent in the observation room, it's a wonder that I held on to any of my jobs at the college. The Toddler Center is a special little universe. It welcomes families from the college, from the university, from the local community and the city. And now about Tovah. Tovah Klein has been the director of the Barnard College Center for Toddler Development and a psychology professor at Barnard College since 1995. Her first toddlers are probably in college. She is an honors graduate of the University of Michigan, where she earned distinction in her major, which was not surprisingly psychology. After college, she worked as a research associate and project manager for research at the Homeless Children's Project at Bank Street. Tovah earned her doctorate in psychology from Duke University in 1994. While completing her doctorate, she was also a clinical fellow in the Department of Psychiatry at the Harvard Medical School. For over 2 decades, Tovah has worked with parents and toddlers. Her research explores parenting challenges, including work and family conflict, children's play, sleep and separation, and child trauma. She writes for and is frequently quoted in print and digital media, including the New York Times, the Washington Post, Redbook, Parents.com, EverydayHealth.com, and Slate.com. A distinguished scholar of toddler development, she has published dozens and dozens of articles in the leading professional journals in her fields and presented papers and addresses at conferences nationally. She has also given invited talks to parents and professionals in this country and abroad, as far away as Japan. Tovah consults worldwide to programs for young children. She was a developmental advisor to Sesame Street and is on the advisory boards of Room to Grow, the Ubuntu Education Fund, the Rwanda Educational Assistance Project, and LearnNow.org. She lives in New York with her husband and 3 children. Beyond being the director of the Toddler Center, Tovah is a very special person. When you enroll your child at the Toddler Center, it's actually the whole family that's enrolling. And that is because she is a very special person who's done a wonderful job in continuing the legacy of her predecessors in making our Toddler Center a treasure of the city. Thank you.
Wow. First of all, Dorothy, thank you. I'm a little overwhelmed, but I can't see through teary eyes, so I will hold it in. My middle son offered to stand up here with me, but I told him he would get bored through the whole talk. So he's sitting, my boys and my husband and my family are sitting in the front row. So I want to start by saying thank you. It really is wonderful to see all of you and a bit overwhelming. There's so many people I could thank, and I won't keep you here all night, I promise. But I will put the timer on here, those of us who do keep track of time. Those of us who aren't toddlers keep track of time. So I do have to say thank you, a number of thank yous, because a book doesn't come into being by any sole person. I think we all know that. First of all, Barnard and the psychology department have been incredibly supportive of me. I've been here for almost 19 years. I had a half-time sabbatical to start writing this book. Little did I know that I needed several of those to write a book. The psychology department, I have been a faculty member in for 19 years, and many of my colleagues are here, thank you. And the Toddler Center has always been affiliated with the psychology department, so that's a very important part to us. The Toddler Center team, who are all here tonight, I don't run the center by myself. They're all here, our teachers, our staff, our associate director, my partner in crime, we'll say something about in a moment. We all do this together on a daily basis. My kids and family are here. Anybody who knows me knows how wonderfully supportive they are and have been. And I really have to say thank you guys, because as much as I have spent nearly 30 years working with toddlers, until you become a mother and you have them in your house, and you really experience the depth of becoming a parent, I don't think I really could get nearly what this was about. I have an incredible book team. Some of them are here. Touchstone and Simon & Schuster have been amazing, from my editor to the publicity people. I have 2 wonderful agents. I have a publicist. I have this incredible surrounding team who have all been great. And Sarah Jessica, who's not here tonight, but whose family is here, some of her family members are here, has not only wrote this forward, but has been incredibly supportive of the endeavor to get the word out there. My friends and colleagues are here from across Barnard, from across my life, from childhood to my first job in New York in 1986, all the way on up, so thank you to all of you. I have neighbors here, and a lot of community folk, and I just want to say thank you, because as I described to my family, I felt like we finally had to say, okay, we can't do this, and Elizabeth, our wonderful coordinator, and I waited to the last hour on that snowy day to say, we really can't hold it. I felt like that football player who's about to kick the field goal in the last 3 seconds of the game, and they call a timeout. That's what it felt like. So thank you for coming on the second round here. But I have to give really a big thank you to all the toddler parents who are here, Toddler Center parents who have teenagers, probably some of you have kids in college at this point, Toddler Center's parents who are here now or recently, and a lot of toddler folks are here who I've just worked with, but you haven't been at the Toddler Center. It's really because of all of you that this book has come into being, because in order to work with toddlers and families, people have to really share a lot of their life if you're going to really help them understand what's going on. And so I appreciate all you've given me to really understand the stage of development, and of course to your toddlers. And then a housekeeping piece. There are going to be note cards going around. I'm going to give a talk, obviously, and then there will be a time for questions. Obviously, I can't answer all your questions, and I can't answer any personal questions tonight about your toddler, but I will be able to take a few questions. So if you want to write down a question, there will be people passing out cards and collecting them, and then I will be able to answer a few. So I'm going to start with just a commemoration to the 40 years that Dorothy was talking about of the Toddler Center. We are celebrating our 40th year. I was not here at the beginning, but I was not even in New York at the time. But the person who started the center was a psychology faculty member. It was really her vision, Professor Fran Schachter, the late Fran Schachter. And although I didn't know Fran, I have heard interesting stories about Fran. And the first teacher at the Toddler Center was our very own Pat Shim. So our continuity over 40 years is Pat. And Pat is my day-to-day, literally toddler partner. I was going to say partner in crime. I'm not sure crime is the right word, but we go hand in hand about toddlers and parents. So since its inception, there's been 3 directors, and I have to say that it's been my pleasure to continue as the director now in the longest capacity, and I can't really imagine a better job for myself. But we are celebrating in many ways the 40th anniversary, so that will include another talk on April 29th by Sam Chaltain for our annual Julia Howe Ward lecture, so please join us for that. He's going to talk about what counts, reimagining what student growth looks like. And then we have a big family reunion on June 14th where we are inviting back all our families, all our students, anybody who's ever had anything to do with Barnard for a fun day at Barnard on the 14th, so please put that on your calendar. And then we're going to start with a video, which some of you may have seen because it's on the web now, but this is our premiere, our public premiere of this video that commemorates the 40 years. And for those of you who don't know, the Toddler Center tells you a little bit about what we do, and then I will talk about toddlers.
You want to go in? Is it done? Where's Charlie? Bring her in. Do you have your name tag? When I started, I could not find any children. This is 40 years ago. I used to stand on street corners and ask parents that I saw with kids, would you like to come to a toddler program?
I was a student at the Toddler Center in its very early years, and my entire life I heard my mother talking about how important the Toddler Center was in my development and in her development as a parent. When you walk into the room, I think what you see are really engaged children. If you give children an environment where they can figure out life, so they can figure out, oh, I've got these blocks, what am I going to do with them? Oh, I just built up a tower, oh, it fell down, how am I going to redo it? That they're going to really learn by doing, and they don't see mistakes as mistakes, they see it as part of the process.
You're not teaching manners, you're not teaching reading and writing, you don't start that early. What you start is to get them to feel safe in an environment with strangers and with other children.
That's the train going fast.
Books, you don't read a whole book to a child this age. You sit them down, and this is your time for cuddling them.
Children who come through our program, but also remember their parents coming through the program, are really learning about there is this inner emotional life, and that every behavior a toddler has an emotional underpinning.
We've learned so much from the research.
I feel like there's this nice synergy of people who have studied toddlers have said for a long time this is a really unique stage, and now the neuroscience is showing yes, in fact, this is.
What makes the Toddler Center so unique is that we conduct research on this pivotal developmental age.
Oh no!
We combine that with our years of observations of toddlers and our hands-on work with them. And that's what gives us a full picture of the complexity of toddlers.
Hey, Mom, I'm not crying.
I think the best part about the program is getting this really academic piece where you're learning about child development, but at the same time you're getting to see the children and work with the children in the classroom.
All right, you're ready.
Look at you. I would say that it was an experience that I definitely, I didn't have a similar one at Barnard, and I would say out of my whole academic career, it was one of really the important cornerstones for my growth.
Oh, Harvey's mine. Is that baby here? That sounds like she has a claw.
It's a wonderful place for my child to start her education. I like being able to say that I was here and that my mother felt it was a nurturing place 36 years ago, and that we came back and it was a similarly nurturing and wonderful place.
And you know it's going to
We really see the center as, yes, it's for the toddlers, but it's also for the parents. And that's where you're building community and support. You know, I'm not alone in this.
We are completely different parents than we would otherwise have been. We have had every aspect of how we would have parented touched by the experience at the Toddler Center.
And now it's time to go home and have some lunch and maybe a nap, and then you can play some more at home.
I feel like I'm the one who went to the Toddler Center.
Goodbye, Nicholas. Goodbye, Sabrina. Goodbye, we'll see you all on Friday.
Thank you. All right. Now I don't have to talk because you know everything there is to know about toddlers. So that's to 40 years, into our next 40. And I also want to thank Stephanie Tsai, who's one of our parents, who I don't think is here tonight because she's on TV at night. Right, is Stephanie here? Did the filming, as did some of our Toddler Center people, and communications helped put this together, and Elizabeth really edited it into this beautiful video, so thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about toddlers. I live in a world of toddlers, and it's a world that I've lived in my entire life, which people who are here, who knew me in my first job in New York, there are a couple of you, know that I came to New York after college already having worked with toddlers and loved them. My work experience in college was in attachment research, and I was completely taken by the fact that young children and their parents seemed like a really important relationship. And something said to me, that relationship matters more than anything else. And when I came to New York, I worked with homeless children and families, and it became clear to me that that relationship meant more than anything else, and I've never left the toddler world. What is it about the toddler world? So broadly, it's a magical world, and seeing it and being in it every single day, it's a world filled with wonder, with literally delight in every moment, or frustration in every moment, and little in between. From their communication skills, or what we might call their lack of communication skills, from their knowing to their not knowing, and to really what I would term their unconventionality, right? Toddlers will do things that not only could we have never dreamed of, even if we thought about it, we couldn't have come up with it. And that's outside of the box thinking. The lack of sort of being boxed in by any convention is what's both delightful but can also make life very hard when you have them in your life. So all of that brings me to why I wrote this book. People have asked me over and over, it's a big interview question, why did you write this book? I wrote this book because it's befuddling to live in a toddler world. And in fact, I live in it so much so that there's times I think, what will I even say when I give a talk? Doesn't everybody know this? And it takes me a while to switch to a rational adult world that we really do live in that is so different than the toddler world. So the toddler world is a kind of confusing, befuddling world if you're a rational, reasonable, sensible person. The other reason I really felt like I should write it, on top of the fact that many, many, many people in this room kept saying, write a book, is that we know so much from science, and yet there's so much information out there. The web has only compounded this, right? There's more and more information available. There's more books available. There's more websites. There's more experts. And yet it leaves everybody that much more confused. And yet if you go back to the science of early development, there's things that we really, really know, and they're not necessarily being translated. So that, in combination with years of observing toddlers, of working with toddlers, of doing research on this really unique stage, and then we apply that science to the best practices in our program, made me think, okay, it's time. So in my talk tonight, what I'm going to do, I have to say it was pretty hard putting together this talk because I thought, well, what am I going to say in a half hour? I just spent years writing a book. But I want to give you entree into the world of toddlers because when we allow ourselves as adults to move out of the mindset that we're in, which is a very particular mindset, and into their world, even a little bit, and then be part of it, it changes our relationship with toddlers. Not only does it make them more delightful and enjoyable to be with, but we also handle them, I think, differently. We respect their needs differently. We respond to their needs differently, and it's not from an adult point of view. And why is that important? For two reasons. One is it benefits our short-term goals, whether you're the parent or somebody caring for them or an educator in a room with them. We can get our short-term goals met easier, such as getting out the door in the morning, getting them to bed. But also it really is, the science tells us over and over, these are the years that our relationships and those day-to-day interactions are setting a foundation for life. And all of us know, if you're an architect or anything else, if you have a solid foundation, then what gets built on it is going to be that much stronger. So it's both about the short-term goals and this foundation. Well, the other piece of this is that there's lots of new science coming out in the neuroscience, and of course there's neuroscientists in this room, which I am not. But the neuroscience is showing, again, in really new but really neat ways, how foundational these early years, and that the brain is setting tracks, for lack of a better word, of lifelong skills that children are going to need as they grow up. No, they're not in place yet, but they're getting set down now. So those are the skills for resilience and being able to handle life, to become independent, to become compassionate and caring. They're not in place, but they're getting set at this point. So that makes it particularly important. So sit back, and if you're ready, we're going to have a journey into toddlers. I feel like it's a science fiction film. Okay, so it's an odd world, I will admit that, and the example I'm going to give is just the other day. I often greet the children in the hallway before the Toddler Center door opens, and there was a child there, and she had a stuffed animal, and she was holding it with like pure delight, and she brought it over to me, gleeful, and I said, "Oh, did you bring that from home?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Oh, that's nice to bring something from home to school, bridges the gap." And she said, "Yes, it's mine." And she was just delighted in it until I realized she had just taken it from somebody else. And I thought, who else in the world takes something and says mine and shows it off as the best thing in the world? Toddlers do. So that is the world that I live in and we live in. And it's really, broadly speaking, the toddler world is fueled by a desire to get what they need, but really to know the world, to know themselves, to figure out themselves, and to figure out everything in the world around them with you by their side. At the same time, it's an enormous world, and so they're running back to home base, usually mommy or daddy, for lots of security, and then they're pushing you away to get out in the world. So what I'm going to do tonight is tell you, and as brief as I can, 10 secrets about the toddler world that make their world so very different from ours that it's almost impossible to understand it. Okay, so the first one, it has to do with the brain. And in a nutshell, the brain is developing in this incredibly rapid phase during the toddler years that's equivalent to the adolescent years. Somehow we all appreciate that the adolescent years are an uproar, and everybody says, oh, neurologically that's an uproar. But I think we didn't appreciate until fairly recently that so are those early years. So imprint it well, you're setting a good base. But that also means that it's a completely different brain than what adults are dealing with. And so what the neuroscience is showing now is that the development is going on through young adulthood. So that means what's starting out, your kids, if you have a toddler right now, are just on this path. And it's going to be developing for the next 20 years or so. You can really say to yourself, that's barely in place, okay? The number that keeps being thrown out in the kind of the policy world is that there's 700 synapses a second connecting in these early years. And that's not to say that you should be running out and getting them classes and teaching them chess and foreign languages that they're not speaking already at home. What I'm saying about that is when they go out in the world and they're touching everything and they're interacting with you and they're figuring it out, a lot of brain development is going on. But it's a different brain, so keep that in mind. The second secret is that toddlers have a huge dilemma. I won't call it a terrible dilemma because I actually think it's a good dilemma. But they have a huge dilemma, and that's this incredible desire to be out in the world and to figure out that world, and at the same time, they desperately need to know that they're not alone. And that's why you get so much push-pull in the toddler years. I think this is pretty obvious, right? One minute they want you and they're screaming for you to help them, and the next minute they're practically shoving you away and saying, I'll do it myself. It's very hard to want to be out in the world, and there's so much new, and there's so much to see, and you want to figure that out, but there's a lot of scary things too. So one moment, we see this all the time at the Toddler Center, the child comes to school, they've been coming for months, they have their routine, they walk in, and a day later when they come back, 2 days later when they come back, they don't want to be there. It all looks new to them. And so that's the dilemma. How much do I want to grow up and be on my own, and how much do I still want to be little and have you right by my side? Now, you're probably all thinking that's not a toddler dilemma, as somebody said to me this weekend. That's a lifelong dilemma. It's absolutely a lifelong dilemma. And every transition we make in life, we revisit this, right? The child goes to kindergarten, your teenage kids are facing dilemmas, you get married, you get a new job. It doesn't matter what it is. Any transition in life, you go back to like, oh, this is so great. Wait, who's here to support me? So this is a lifelong dilemma. And again, if you see this as a base, then when we help them figure out, okay, you can go out there and explore, and I'm going to accept you for who you are, the good, the bad, and the ugly of you, then they're able to come back to you no matter what they've done right or wrong. So that's the second piece. The third piece, and I actually think this is the hardest to grasp as a reasonable, rational adult, or even a somewhat reasonable, rational adult, is that toddlers have zero sense of time, zero. And, not only do we deal with this with toddlers all the time, but, I try to help parents with this. I teach students about this. It's a really hard concept to grasp. We lead our lives based on a schedule. We wake up in the morning, we say what day it is. What day is today? Oh, Monday, here's my routine. What time do I need to be dressed by to get to that meeting on time? Our whole life is on a schedule, right? We had dinner early tonight in my house so we could get everybody here for this. You all made your accommodations. Toddlers have zero sense of time. Now, the delightful part of that is they live in the moment. And again, this is what draws me back to them. They live literally for this moment with pure delight as if it's the only moment they've ever experienced ever. But think of those scenarios. You've made plans to meet your friend at the park, 2 o'clock, you're going to be there, you're walking with your child, they see an ant. Aha, an ant. Here's the ant, right? You can't get to the playground because they're living in the moment. And even though it's delightful to them, it's very hard to shift them off of it. It's why transitions are hard. Right, if you're living in the moment, they're not thinking about, oh, and then I've got to get ready for dinner or come to the table. They're thinking about what else can I do to play with this? So it's a very frustrating part for adults, and yet it's really a wondrous world if we let toddlers live in it. The fourth secret about toddlers is they're not mini adults. They just aren't. And like it or not, they're not like us. And I think this gets very confusing for lots of us. Myself as a new parent as well. Not only are they not like us, they can't be like us. So remember, their brains are not there and they're not going to be there for a long time. They don't have the thinking skills. They don't have the reasoning skills. But I think more importantly, it's their job to figure out who they are first. And this is the part where people say, oh, you work with toddlers, they're really selfish, right? And I say, yeah, they actually are. They're supposed to be, because they're figuring out who they are. They're figuring out how to get their needs met. And every time they're comforted or cared for in any way, they're getting their needs met. So they eventually become oriented towards others. But they're not many adults. And what I mean by that is it's so easy for us as parents to get worried that a behavior at time 1 is a direct line to adolescence. That's always the fear. Adulthood. I don't want my child to be selfish forever. And so what do we all say as parents? I need to nip this in the bud. And I hear this, a lot because a number of years ago, parents started saying to me, my child's rude. And at first I was like, rude? Toddlers can't be rude. And then I realized, oh yeah, from an adult point of view, they're rude most of the time because they're not oriented to our social graces, but but they become oriented over time when we model for them, right? We're reasonable to them, we use manners, they eventually get it. But that's not where they are. They really are about figuring out themselves or responding to their own emotions. I have an example in the book of a child in an elevator. This was one of our children at the Toddler Center, very sweet child, very quiet actually when she was at the Toddler Center. And now when she would be in an elevator in her apartment building, she was 4, so not very big. Some lovely neighbor, we all have them, right? Would come in the elevator and say hello to her, what's your name, or something like this, and the child would hide because it's a crowded elevator, she's little, she doesn't really know this person. And then she escalated it because obviously the woman didn't get the message, and she would see the woman again and she would say, go away, or better yet, you stink. And we hear this a lot from parents, right? You've all had this situation where you're like, putting your head down. But from her point of view, this doesn't feel right, and she's saying stay away. From our point of view, it's rude because we're adults. But our children really, really need us to protect them and to say, I get it, you don't have to say hello at this moment. It doesn't mean she's going to be like that at 14, and I think that's always the worry for parents, is that there's a direct line from A to Z. So when we accept them for who they are, and we really see there's good and there's bad in every child. Look, there's good and bad in every one of us. But at least in our eyes, sometimes they seem really great and sometimes they really don't. When we come to accept them in all those pieces, they actually grow stronger. The other way I think we get misled as parents is that once children have language, we think they're really mini adults, right? Infants, we hold, we coddle, we comfort, we care for. They're not, once you know your infant, they're usually not that hard to read. I don't want to say their needs aren't important, but they're not as complex as the toddler who has so much going on. And as soon as the toddler starts to separate and become their own person, we have all kinds of conflict with them. And as soon as they get language, we go, aha, now we can communicate with them like I can communicate with my friend, and that's not the case. Even a very verbal child has a lot of language with little reasoning behind it. So I think my favorite examples of this is, watching parents or, thinking of myself doing this, where they're literally trying to get the child to make a promise. Now, we're going to go to a restaurant. Remember, you have to be quiet when you're in the restaurant. You're going to be quiet, right? Grandma likes when you're quiet in the restaurant. Remember, Grandma got upset last time. Okay. And then occasionally I hear parents saying, promise. Okay, it's 3 o'clock. Guess what? 6 o'clock at the restaurant? Not quiet. And it's not that children aren't loyal in their promises. It's that time. Remember time? They said it at 3 o'clock, and they meant it at 3 o'clock, but they can't do it at 6 o'clock. And so I think that gets very confusing because children have the language to tell us, oh, sure, I understand the rule. And it's why I think often adults get caught up in, but he knows better. And I say, yeah, he's got the language, but he can't stop himself. The fifth little secret, maybe these aren't little secrets, maybe these are big secrets. The fifth secret of the toddler world is that figuring out the world and becoming your own person means power, with a capital P. That means they're starting to make their own decisions, their own choices, they're figuring out their way, but it also means my way first, your way can come later. And this is where we battle our toddlers, right? Whether they're 2, 3, 4, 5, I hear it all the way up. I would call toddlers way longer because there's a piece of toddler in children much longer than, say, up to 5 or 6. And there's only a few places that young children can really battle, right? Where do they have power? Food, clothes, toileting, and sleep. There are a few other places that they really can have power. And in all the years I've worked with toddlers, and if I put that together with Pat's 40 years, in our 60 combined years, those are the areas that toddlers battle because that's really the only place they can. And it's not that they're trying to be difficult, it's really that they're looking for those choices. And we're always saying, what children need is not all that negotiating. What they need is a little bit of choice. And that little bit of choice can literally be, do you want to put the rubber duck in the bathtub or your doll? Oh, the rubber duck first, the doll second, great. But no, you can't have the whole living room in there. So very limited spaces help children make these choices. The more we help children to make choices and make decisions starting very young, the better they get at doing it as they get older. And maybe the secret of learning that I found with 3 children, 2 are beyond elementary school, 1's in elementary school, is that learning is all about choices. How am I going to approach learning that new word that I've never seen before? How am I going to figure out these numbers that I'm supposed to multiply when it didn't work the first way? Choice is a big part of learning. And so those early sort of decisions and getting that sense of I can do this empowers them throughout life. The sixth big secret is they really need you more than you could know. They need you, and you, I mean the parent. They need you more than anything. It's hard to imagine how badly they need us because they push us so hard. They push our buttons, they push us away, they fight us. And at the end of the day, they need to know that we're there for them. And that can be hard. I had 3 toddlers at various points in my life. I don't have any at home now. But for them to really know that no matter what they show us, no matter which colors, the good, the bad, the up, the down, that we're going to still love them is really important, that we're there for them. And that can be very confusing to parents. I will often hear people say, teachers as well as parents, no, I don't think she even cares about me. And I say, yes, she really, really does. You know, that classroom teacher is their solid rock in the absence of the parents. The 7th secret is that happiness does not come from making them happy. I'm very sorry to tell this generation of parents. Happiness comes from helping children deal with the hard parts of life. Everybody can be happy. We all know how to be happy, right? I hope you all know how to be happy. Children know how to be happy, and cheering them on and saying, yay, and good job, and come on, come on, come on, and, you know, I'll get you out of this doesn't make them happy. What really gets children happy in the long run, and I mean all of this is over time, is that we help them handle adversity. We help them when things don't go their way. We help them when they're upset. When they come out of a tantrum, you know, they've just had a tantrum, and you pick them up and say, well, you were so angry, but I still love you. Come on, let's go play something. You give them a hug. Those are the ways that their brain learns to deal with adversity. And this actually is a place that the neuroscience is really coming into play to show how that emotional arousal goes up. They need us to bring them down and to be there to comfort them. You don't want that kind of emotional arousal to go up and the child to feel like, I am so bad that even mommy or daddy won't take care of me, is a terrible place to sit. So helping them through adversity is what builds resilience. The 8th one is that the qualities that drive us crazy now, or challenge us, or push our buttons, are exactly what most of us want for our children later. And I think when you think of it that way, you can back off a little bit and say, maybe this isn't so hard. So think about what that is. Independence, I'll do it my way, right? Don't we all want our kids to be able to think for themselves? We want them to stand up for themselves and have voice. You don't want your kid to be walked all over in life, right? And yet we're constantly saying to our young kids, like, no, no, no. I said, do it this other way. Their curiosity, passion, that's what drives learning, right? Motivation comes from being passionate about something. The desire to know is the basis of learning. Toddlers have an incredible desire to know. Persistence. We all know about persistent young children. You know, try to get a 5-year-old to switch modes when they love what they're building. It's very hard to do, and yet it's that persistence that we want later. And then the 9th one is, and I mentioned this before, but they're not rude. I know it seems like they're rude. They really don't know the social rules. They can't know the social rules. And I experienced this for myself a bit when I went to Japan last year. I was invited to northern Japan. I have to say it was an amazing trip. And I was very uncomfortable. I was the only Westerner. I was traveling with a woman from Columbia University who is Japanese, so that helped tremendously. And I kept saying to her, we're like the honored guests everywhere we go. She kept saying, no, no, you are the Westerner. And I was like, it was very clear that I was not Japanese, and I didn't know the customs. And I kept whispering to her, you know, do I bow now? Do I? And she kept saying, they're going to forgive you everything. But I thought, wow, this is how toddlers feel, because I didn't know, you know, when you crossed your legs on the floor, when you picked up the chopsticks. It's a very uncomfortable place to be, and toddlers get overwhelmed because they don't know the social rules, and then adults can come down very hard on them rather than saying like, hey, that's fine, you know, I'll help you through this. The piece that goes with that is toddlers cannot tell a lie. Now, I know those of you who have 3, 4, and 5-year-olds are thinking mine does. And again, I called Pat today and I said, was it George Washington who told that lie about the cherry tree, whether it's a myth or not? Toddlers really don't lie. They do 2 things. They have a lot of wishful thinking, right? So there's great research on this, right? You know, young kids, you know, your 4-year-old comes home from school and they say like, oh, today so-and-so brought a pony to school. And you're like, really? You know, like a little, no, real pony. But it's wishful thinking. They're wishing this happened. They wanted this happen, or maybe their friend said it happened. Is one. And the second is when they really figure out, and this is a really important concept, they figure out, aha, I have my own thoughts, and they're different than what mommy or daddy knows, and I can actually know something that you don't know. So any parent who knows me and has, interacted with me around this, when they come to me and say, my child's lying, I say, tell me what they're doing, and I go like this, that's so great, they figured out that they have their own ideas. And it often starts like this. Here's how it started in my house. Hey guys, it's dinner, did you wash your hands? Yes, I washed my hands. Filthy, dirty hands. And that's the first time that they realize, hey, she doesn't know if I washed them or not, or they think they. So there's two ways to handle that, right? One is to really shame them. I know you didn't. Go back and wash them. Or there's the approach of like, really, you did? All right, you know. And they would like run back and wash their hands just because they were given the power. And that's also a piece of the power. And then I'll say the 10th secret into the toddler world, so that now you should really be in that world and saying, okay, I'm going to adjust how I see them, is that they stumble, they fall, they make mistakes, they even fail. Yes, parents, they fail. But those are the key to life, really. Why? Because one is young children don't see what we call failure or mistakes or even stumbles as that. They see it as part of the process until we label it as bad or wrong, right? That's not the way to do that. You haven't completed that correctly. Says to a child, you're wrong, don't trust yourself. But if you watch children in particular building something, so something very open-ended, they try, it falls down. I see this in our 2-year-olds, and I see this at the elementary school that our youngest still goes to, but I go back to the pre-K classroom and watch the kids block build. And they will build, the 2-year-olds do this, the 3, 4, 5-year-olds do this. They build, it falls, they look at it, they might be a little frustrated, you help them through that, and then they figure out, okay, am I gonna rebuild this? Am I gonna build something new? And what's amazing about that is I have seen block structures in this pre-K classroom at their school that any adult would have told you, whether they had an engineering degree or not, I certainly don't, that there's no way those blocks could balance that way. Like, it defies gravity. And yet there will be a structure that's standing all day long with blocks at all these different angles because young children really know no bounds on possibility if we give them the freedom. Now, that's not to say it's a free-for-all, right? We are there to provide guidelines for them and parameters because it's not a free-for-all. But if we do step back and we allow them that process, then they learn, what do they learn from what we would consider mistakes or stumbles? They learn flexibility, they learn thinking, they learn lots of possibilities. You might have to come up with 5 different ways to try that. And eventually they learn negotiation because they've got to work with others. So all of those steps get us into the toddler world, I think, from a different point of view. So before I end, I just want to leave you with a final note about the parent side, because of course there's the toddlers and there's understanding the toddlers, but really the key to toddlers is understanding ourselves. That's, I guess, a different book. There is some in my book about that. There's a chapter on, who are we, where do we come from, because that is so much the key to working with toddlers and giving them the guidance and the authority that they actually need. They need us to be in charge, but to really see their needs. So I'm just going to read you a piece from the book, partly because Mary Gordon, who I don't think is here tonight, said to me, she's a Barnard faculty member, she couldn't come to the first night, the winter night. She said to me, oh, you're doing a reading. And I thought, oh, am I actually supposed to read from the book, Mary? She said, yeah, aren't you reading from your book? So I was like, yes, it does, I guess so. So I want to leave you with a final note, because this is really about parents or for people who work with toddlers, whether it's grandparents, whether it's caregivers, teachers. We have to know ourselves if we're going to really guide toddlers and see them for who each individual is. So just as toddlers struggle to figure out who they are, gain independence, and still know that they are loved by you in all their good and bad, and can count on you through thick and thin, parents struggle as well. Parenting young children is simply hard work, but I'm here to say that I've survived it with 3 wonderful children, the front row. We put our all into it, but in return, what comes back to us day to day is not always easy, pleasant, or even nice. And I will add to that, it's often not pretty either. Parenting, especially of children at these ages, and perhaps again at adolescence, is not about getting validation or thank yous or even overt appreciation from our children. Sure, they say thank you at certain times, but our children's role is not to make us happy. And I have to say, I think there's a lot of confusion in this era about children's roles. We're the adults, they're the child. It's not to make us feel good either. We put our all into them because we love them, and our hope is that one day they will turn out to be those people who at least envision some of what we hope they will. Keep that long-term goal in mind as you move through the ups and downs, joyful and not so joyful moments of being a parent of young children. It is hard because often this involves putting our own expectations aside in order to allow our children to become who they are meant to be, which can be quite different from who we envisioned. But when we step aside and still provide support, our children can grow and blossom with us out of their way and yet close by. And that's the tricky part, I think, of being a parent. How do you stay out of their way but still be there for them? It's not an easy place to stay. Without them feeling ashamed of who they are or what they feel, particularly when it differs from what we want, or of how they see the world. Parenting is hard for other reasons too. It is nonstop. We can't simply bow out and then return when we feel ready. There are no sabbaticals in parenting. Our children, especially at this pivotal toddler period, count on us to be there for them. We are their constant, and I can't emphasize that enough. You know, again, going back to the developmental science, the neuroscience, this is a unique window, those early years, and it's being shown over and over again. It's a special opportunity, so we owe it to them. We are their security, we are their safety in a big and unpredictable world. So our job as parents is to let our toddlers grow, and that means letting go of our babies. So this is the other side of being a parent. We all want our children to grow up, but let's face it, we desire for them to need us. And that's our push-pull. And I can assure you of this. When we give them the space to move out into the world, to grow, to try out life, to stumble on their way to figuring it all out, they do come back to us, even when we think they won't, because they need us. They need us as home base for support and acceptance and comfort. They need us in new ways as they grow, but often we don't know what those new ways are, and we have to wait and figure them out. What they take from the toddler years, what they build deep inside that burgeoning self, and that burgeoning self is fragile. Our students will tell you, we emphasize this so much at the Toddler Center, when they're just developing self, it's so fragile and it's so easily deflated. But when they develop that really deep inner security, that we will accept them for who they are, no matter who they are, that mommy and daddy are home base, then we're setting them forward on a good foundation. But we need to toe our own line between giving them a roadmap that includes structures and limits, and letting them be who they are while we stay on those sidelines. Then our toddlers will have the strength to develop and grow into who they're meant to be, which is not always who we want them to be. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of questions, and they are going to also open. There's a celebration of the book. There are books for sale in the back. I will be signing them. And please eat, drink, and be merry. But I will take a couple of questions. Thanks, Pat. These are tough questions. Okay. I'll start with the easier ones. How can you handle a fit or a tantrum? This is probably the most common, toddler question, right? So I think the first thing is, there's a lot in this book about this. Toddler tantrums are really because toddlers are overwhelmed. They have few recourses. Think about it. They've got language they can barely use, right? It's brand new to them, and often, not only do parents not believe me, I think our wonderful students, many of whom are here tonight, so I want to say thank you to all of you as well, because we would not have the vibrancy of the Toddler Center without them. Don't believe me when I say, children have a lot of language, but they don't use it at school. It's very new to them. So in the moment of being overwhelmed by emotions, they're flooded. They are flooded, and those structures that they need for emotion regulation, those are the ones that I was talking about are just coming on board. They're not there, right? I asked a friend of mine who's a developmental neuroscience, and I consulted her throughout this whole book process, like, is this read of the literature right? I said, can I just say that all those structures in the prefrontal cortex that regulate emotion just aren't there yet? She said, no, you can't say that. You can say they're barely there, they're just getting online. But if you remember that they literally don't have the capacity yet to regulate, they need us to regulate them. And so what is the tantrum? The tantrum is like a last recourse. I can't talk my way out of this. I can't figure out what's going on. Now I'm completely flooded by emotions. The only thing I can do is just fall apart. So how do you handle it? You sit by them, right? So you label emotions. it's usually anger, frustration. Sometimes it's just pure sadness. I mean, they've just had it, right? But it's more often because you said no, like, you've already had your 14th cookie, there's no more. Or, we actually don't have that toy in the house. So you label it, and you really sit by them. When toddlers are at that point of total meltdown, and this is true of 2-year-olds, this is also true of 6-year-olds, right? 6-year-olds don't tantrum as much, but 6-year-olds still throw fits. They need you to sit by them and really wait it out and then say, wow, you are so angry. Too bad we don't have that toy. Let's move on. And when you come back together with them after that tantrum, that is truly what says to them, I can lose it. Believe me, I think our kids hate us in these moments. Not teenage hate, don't worry, but they're enraged that we've put up a limit. But when they come back and they're back together with you, it is truly that book Where the Wild Things Are, right? We all know that book. What happens in it? Max gets sent to his room by his mother. We don't know why. And he goes to the worst place imaginable where the wild things are. But at the end, he comes back, and what happens? Anybody know the end of Where the Wild Things Are? Dinner is waiting, and it's still hot. Mommy is still there for me. So that is really how you handle tantrum. Don't negotiate. Don't try to cajole them out of it. Let it be. How do you feel about technology, iPads, TV, et cetera, for toddlers? Who hasn't already seen me on the web or TV or print media talking about this? So here's the quick answer, because this is a big, media loves this. They're always calling me and saying, will you come on and talk about this? I'm like, I don't even really love this topic. It's here to stay. There is no question that children, this generation is growing up in a whole different world, even different than my own children, the youngest of whom is almost 10, who was not born into iPads or iPhones or any of that. But everybody has been born into technology. But I think, the studies are very new. We certainly know nothing long-term. It's not long-term yet. So the best I can say is that most things in, if you titrate it, are not going to be terrible, but that technology really does take toddlers away from the real world, and toddlers are all about exploring through their senses. And when I say senses, I mean everyone. Feeling, touching, tasting, seeing, feeling literally in their body, stomping on it. We take out in our room, just to tell you the opposite of technology, contact paper. The contact paper that you put over, paper if you want to preserve something. The teachers lay it out on the floor. It's always very tedious to watch them do it, and they do it so beautifully. They lay it out on the floor, they tape it down, and then our little toddlers walk across it, right? Some of them are so small that their feet come out of their shoes because it gets stuck on it. But what you see when they're doing it, some of them are very hesitant, right? They're not going to go anywhere near it. But when they go on it, so many things happen, and so one is they feel it, right? Their feet literally get stuck on it, and they have to feel their whole body lifting it. They hear it. You can see them sort of, you can see other kids watching it and hear it. They feel it, and then they get this real sense of agency, because as they figure out that they can lift their feet and walk across it, and then start running across it, they start touching it. That's called using every sense in your body. I've yet to see them lick it, although I'm sure somebody will one of these days. Technology doesn't allow them to do it. There's no question that it's flat. On the other hand, is there some learning going on? There probably is. And are there lots of fun, interesting TV shows? Absolutely. My kids grew up on Sesame Street. What else did you guys grow up on? The reruns of Electric Company, not the new one, but the old one. Caillou, Cyber Chase. I mean, there's lots of good shows on TV. There's lots of good videos, but you have to limit it. You don't want to take them out of the real world. And I will give this editorial about technology. I think it really is harmful to have it outside. I see, particularly in New York City, where you don't even have to be in the park, right? You can just walk down Broadway, and children are riveted by the people walking, the stuff in the window, but certainly in the park, there's plenty to see. And I see children on their parents' iPhones. I think it's a big mistake, because one of the things that children learn when they have to sort of be and see and look as they become better observers. Children are very observant, but they also learn how to regulate themselves, to have these moments of kind of just taking it in. They're in the stroller and they're just sort of hanging out. And I think when they lose out on those moments, this is my guess that research is going to show that you're going to see differences in regulation if we could really follow kids over time. So anything in moderation. How can we help our children resist peer pressure later in school? Wow, another $1 million question. I certainly don't have time to go through this, but what I would say is that the foundation for resisting peer peer pressure, we all went through it, right? Don't you shudder at the thought of this? Don't you see yourself in middle school or something, like 8th grade with the girls? Well, for me, the girls. Is that we help children really build a good sense of self, but that comes in a very paradoxical way. It comes from accepting the goodness in our children, but it also comes from accepting everything we dislike, all the bad stuff in our children. And I say that because when children are being, quote, bad, and I certainly don't think kids are bad, but when they're doing things that parents say to me, he's being bad or he's not listening, there's a reason for it. And it's usually a desire or anger or frustration. They're mad at us, which parents don't really like. And we can really accept that and say to our children, I get it, you're really mad at me right now, that's cool, it's still not happening. It says to them, I accept you for who you are. So if you can figure out who your children are and start to like those parts that you might really not like, then you're gonna instill a better sense of self in them, and they're gonna be able to have more voice as they get older and be able to say, maybe I don't really wanna do that. And I will end it there. Please come have wine and food and celebrate with us. Thank you.